Yes, man. I know hope y'all thought I wasn't lying. You know what I'm saying? I thought I was. You know what I'm trying to say, man. We back for another episode of Keeping It Conscious, man. Tonight we getting into labor and black people's unique relationship to labor. I got a special guest that does work in the trenches. I'm gonna consider him a organic intellectual that has a lot of knowledge from his experiences. Um, there was a lot of conversation about how immigrants were stealing our jobs and taking our jobs. And I think the Great Plies, I think that's funny to kind of saw that statement like that. But the Great Plies made a tweet today, and he talked about how there was so much outrage around immigrants taking our jobs. But now that AI has all this policy around it, that is, he didn't say this part, but I'm filling this in. Now that AI has so much policy around it that that damn near prohibits it being regulated and restricted, we understand that this is what's going to be taking our jobs, but there's not much outrage to how this is taking up the job market. To me, it shows how there's a lot of manufactured consent when it comes to how people is pissed off at immigrants. You know what I'm saying, specifically? But to me, it also shows that there is a lack of genuine concern when it comes to jobs. It seems like there's had to be a battery put in certain people's backs for you to start to care about how uh, the labor force is starting to impact black people uniquely. I feel like in a conversation about Marx, we usually talk a lot about, in conversation about labor, we usually talk a lot about Marx and Marxism, and I won't get too deep in there in this conversation. I will kind of bring it up a little bit. I think that when I think critically when it comes to intersectionality in black labor, I always sit with the thought of how Afro pessimism taught me that, both the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, both the working class and the ruling class, have the ability to buy a slave. And though we don't live on the plantation right now, I'm very conscious and mindful to how the positionality of the plantation still kind of impacts our reality today. Um, I think that when we started talking about merit and how, if you work hard, you feel me, and show your merit, you'll be able to get access and resources and opportunities. I feel like thinking about capitalism and how labor is not valued the same, even when you have the same credentials and you're doing the same labor. I think that it begs the question to how black people are positioned by labor and how our labor is valued within the market. I feel like I could argue that the more black people, the more we experience economic progression, the more white backlash we experience. A lot of us talked about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how black people wasn't the main beneficiaries of DEI. It actually was white women and veterans, and you know what I'm saying, this specific group of Asian people. And this, like, I think that talking about how black labor is always seen as something to be commodified and always seen as capital in itself, nothing for us to capitalize off of. It's important to see how they criminalize every avenue in which I think black people are able to be critical in terms of equity and how our labor is valued in comparison to the other workers, but also being critical about how institutions and systems also pathologize the way our labor comes devalued. We know there's multiple studies that show that even when black people have the same educational experience, have the same type of labor experience, still receive, lower pay. I think that this is indicative of how racial capitalism, you know what I'm saying? Shout out to who I'm thinking about right now. Shout out to Cedric Robinson. We know that capitalism didn't emerge in a race neutral way. It wasn't built, we know that it was built on racial hierarchies. And I think it's something that a lot of white leftists and particularly Marxists usually get. Uh, I feel like they engage in That was crazy. That was that. I didn't freeze. Like the internet kicked me off. You know what I'm saying? Like I think it fits in very well actually. Niggas doing labor when we're doing labor for ourselves, it somehow gets destabilized. I felt like I was really cooking and thinking about how, you know, capitalism is usually seen through a very racial neutral lens that says that if you work hard, you'll be able to, you know, benefit from the fruits of your labor. You know, we all taught that. We all taught that, you know, it's not about race, it's about how hard you work. And hard work is going to be able to persevere through any type of racial discrimination. Typically is how they talk about it. Typically. W.E. Du Bois and this dude named David Rodiger, they are very critical with how the wages of whiteness or how white workers are how even though they exploit it, they often receive a psychological wage of racial superiority, and that what divides them from the working class and weakens the solidarity. I think that it's not only about solidarity though; it's about how we all get locked into this dehumanizing way of relating to each other. And when you only think about the value that we have for individuals as being like, what can you do for me? If you can't do shit for me, then you ain't got no value at all. Yes, meritocracy is a theory, and I would definitely say the myth of meritocracy. We know that right now, when it comes to like working hard, there is a lot of unqualified, meritless white men that have been appointed in the Trump administration that literally illustrate the myth of meritocracy. When I think about capitalism and labor is usually how we're able to define who owns what and how we're able to dictate who is owed. You know what I'm saying? What they owed. And when we see that the white men in Trump administration, they all believe that being white automatically makes you more qualified and more deserving of particular positions of power. To me, this illustrates the myth of meritocracy because it shows how it's not actually the merits. You feel me? The actual things you have to learn, to earn. It's usually the position that allows for you to benefit from nepotism or allows for you to benefit from different things in your network that where your labor is seen as being a little bit more valuable. When I seen Ketanji Brown Jackson be one of the most decorated, meritful individuals on Supreme Court right now, and they called her a DEI high and called her unqualified. And then we seen that white woman, Amy Coney Barrett, whatever her name is, ACB, ABC, whatever her name is. We seen. I ain't trying to be disrespectful. I just didn't remember her name, like dead ass didn't remember her name. But we see that she didn't have much experience when it came to being in the courtroom, when it came to being a judge. But because she was seen as being a white woman, you know, her being a DEI hire, it wasn't really brought into the question. I feel like it's something about how Black people's labor is always able to be pathologized by white people, especially if it doesn't benefit them first and foremost. When I was in college, I came across, you know, critical race theory. And in critical race theory, I learned from this dude by the name of Dr. Derek Bell. I think it's his name. He was the mentor. He's one of the mentors to Barack Obama. He had this paper I had read that was called the Race Traders, where he uses like sci-fi and science and shit to make some grandiose philosophical claims. One of the things that he used and talked about was the race interest convergence theory, about how typically in white America, white folks don't want to do nothing for Black people that doesn't benefit them first and foremost. And I think when it comes to a conversation about labor, it's important to see how our labor is usually only seen as being inherently valuable unless it's forwarding the empire or is able to be folded into white interests. If it doesn't fold that way, it's usually seen as being not helpful, unproductive, or just a straight up threat. I had the honor in meeting Dr. Well, you know what I'm saying, honorary, but I had the opportunity in meeting Fred Hampton Jr. And I was on a panel with him. And he said a lot of things, but something that really stuck with me was him talking about his father and the labor that his father was doing when he was a child. And he disclosed to the crowd that his father, Fred Hampton Sr., was already being watched by the government by the time he was 14. And that he was so young that the government people that was watching and listening to his phone call thought that it was a typo because he was so young. And what Fred Hampton said, you feel me, was don't think you're too young to make an impact and don't think you're too young to be assassinated. In the conversation about labor, I think it's important to see, even if you're a young person watching this, to never underestimate the value and impact of your labor, regardless of what the world trying to tell you about it. Or in regardless of what folks in the community trying to tell you about it. What I know is that a lot of us, when it comes to working, we measure our success in proximity to white people. I.e., if we're close to white people, we view our work as being successful. And if our work is not being successful, we feel like we're too close to blackness and too close to black people. I think it's something that we internalize that I feel like it's incentivized by capitalism that gets us to see white as inherently valuable and black as being devalued. And when it comes to like different businesses and corporations, we tend to feel like our labor will inherently be more valuable with the white folks, even while acknowledging, you know what I'm saying, that racism and white supremacy, specifically in the market of work, the market of the, you know what I'm saying, shit of being able to get you a job. Even though we're able to acknowledge that there's racism within there and typically black labor is devalued, a lot of us still have this idea that if we work for a white institution, have a white boss, our labor might get valued more. To me, this is all a part of the pathology when we start thinking about like labor and work and how black people are able to put food on the table, put a roof over their head, and put, you know what I'm saying, clothes on their back. Toya, where you at, Toya? I'm about to send you the link. Toya, I'm about to send you the link right now. I'm sending you the link. Hold on, Toya. I was about to find you. So we gonna do. Bam, I found it right here. But yeah, man, I think that hold on, I know Toya can provide some shit. I'm finna get her the link. Get her this link real fast. Apologies. She said, and we feel like we haven't accomplished anything real until it gets validated by white people hating on BET Award. I feel like that not only is that like a great point, I think it really illustrates how like black institutions, when it comes to entertainment, starts to get devalued because we start seeing like, man, we ain't gonna like literally start seeing how A-list celebrities in the black community stop supporting. My bad, y'all. Hold on. Why didn't let me send it? Bam, got it right there. Hey, what up, man? You
What's going on?
I'm before you introduce yourself, let me tell the people, you know what I'm saying, and my sister Toya,
Do your thing, take your time.
But the reason why I'm having a conversation about labor right now is because I met this man right here, you know, during the NAACP convention, and he had a lot of very thought-provoking things to say about the work he was doing when it comes to like really just being in labor and unions and thinking about how black people uniquely, how we exploited, how we taken advantage of, and how we need to be more intentional about thinking about labor. You know what I'm saying? But with that being said, though, can you introduce yourself to the people?
For sure, man. I appreciate you. My name is Daniel Rosebud. I go by Rosebud. And so my background is business communication, computer software. I've done a lot of work in programming or project management, program management, advocacy, issue area advocacy, rather, really focusing on issues like hunger, homelessness, disconnected youth between 18 and 24. That being people disconnected from work and or school. I kind of landed on labor as my specialty topic. I've served on a number of different boards from the Department of Community Affairs here in Georgia, really overseeing housing policy and funding, to working as a advocate with the Center for Law and Social Policy and their youth policy teams. And so really focusing in on labor as my specialty. I think out of working on other issues. I feel like access to employment is really what gets people access to permanency. So the ability to exist as a fixture within the community, contribute positively, you can think about that as having a home, family, contributing to the community around them positively and making money all at the same time. And so labor is now my thing. And so really focusing on industrial labor as a topic of my education.
Hell yeah. And my sis right here, I feel like everybody know who you is, but this is in case people are new right now. You're having a conversation on labor. Can you introduce yourself?
What's good, y'all? I am Professor Latoya Green. I am a director of debate. I am a professor in communication studies. I'm a debate coach at heart, but also in relationship to labor, twofold, a resident of Southern California, which, demonstrates to me the constant hostility toward labor from individuals who don't have the normal access to institutions, systems, and structures that allow for their labor to be appreciated, i.e. migrant labor. Thinking about this labor conversation from the perspectives of people who are literally being scared off the streets and not being able to make money, make a means to provide for themselves, largely because they've been demonized by systems. Also, it's not lost on me, being a resident of Southern California, that prison labor is a key and necessary part of these conversations, because when we think about the fires that ravage the communities near and dear to my heart and with people who I've built a relationship with as a transplant, I can't help but to think about those individuals who are on the front line, first called to go out there and put their lives on the line in the name of labor to keep our community safe. And so on top of the fact that the college debate topic for the 25-26 season is all about the United States federal government's relationship to labor and labor laws and labor justice. So, I'm just scrolling through listening to my brother talk what he's talking about. And I'm leaning in a little bit closer, largely because, when we talk about labor, we talk about us. We talk about life. We talk about the defining lines between what people say you do and don't deserve as a human being. You know what I'm saying? If you believe in God, you've heard person that don't work, man that don't work, don't eat. And so in a society built around those fundamentals and those concepts, you got to start wondering how we validate different types of labor, how we look at everything from sex work to the labor of Black women to migrant labor. My wheels are just spinning just listening to you talk. So you rolling.
Rosebud. What's your? I feel like Toya has said a lot of things. You know what I'm saying? What you?
Yeah, good stuff. Like, definitely, she touched on just the different spaces where labor issues take place. So, like, when we talk about the prison industrial complex and what really keeps it going is really a pseudo slavery kind of system where they're passing inmates institution to institution, getting government funding off of each of them, but as well as like putting them to work to create things like phone chips or tags. And so we do talk about exploiting, like they're exploiting prisoners 2 or 3 different ways and making income off of them. But we also talk about, when we talk about how labor has impacted us as a people, us becoming free, us looking for industry, music being one of the first industries where we've been very enterprising as Black people and owning that space. But to farming, right? Like we don't always look into how we were freed and turned farming into our main source of labor, right? I think I don't want to quote the research wrong, but I think at the time that slaves were freed and we kind of took things into our own hands, about 14% of farms were all owned by Black people, right? Until they started to repossess that land through adverse means, right? Either overturning laws that granted that property or giving out predatory loans that eventually ran Black farms out of business, right? And then they seized the land. So we talk about labor as a platform. We talk about labor as a means of enterprising and becoming independent in our own ways. We talk about labor too as a tool or as a weapon that has been used for and against us, right?
I'm curious. I'm curious. I'm curious. My question to both of y'all, just to stir the pot, literally. How do y'all feel about the notion of being able to hustle ourselves out of white supremacy? In a conversation about labor, a conversation about labor, a conversation about oppression and power. A lot of people in our community believe that, you know, the only color is green, and if you work a little harder, that, you know, maybe you'll be able to, you know, live free. You know, we seen the sinners, you feel me, smoking stack, being able to try to work their way into freedom. You feel me? Recognizing that, you know, economic freedom is a thing. Still though, the question, how do y'all feel about the sentiment being able to hustle your way out of freedom?
Say that again. You said the sentiment.
It's like, yes, the people feeling like in the sentiment of I can hustle myself out of oppression.
I mean, I feel like in a world where white supremacy is a system, is a structure, it's an institutionalized, codified kind of formula that has been perfected and is being perfected constantly. And it's not just a feeling, it's not an inclination, it's not, you know, kind of something that just agitates us, but it's an actual reality that has been quantified over generations. I feel like that's a really toxic mindset to be in, because it pushes us away from a human right framework, right? Just kind of really understanding the basic fundamental levels of, you know, what people are supposed to have as like humans with hearts and minds and the ability to move around and socialize and be interdependent on each other, like not recognizing that, you know, we have created hustle culture around things that are allowing people to pull themselves up out of the trenches because they don't have clean water. We are talking about hustle mentality that is only situated so that people can, you know, do things like have four walls around them, right? We know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and the basic, most fundamental need that a lot of people have are the ability to have food, water, shelter, safety. And so to associate a hustle mentality to things that are not extracurricular, right? That are not just something benign or separate, but that are at the core part and parcel of what makes a human, it really is a toxic trope that we end up falling into, because this hustle mentality does nothing for nobody when the system is working as it should. And what happens is you get this hustle mentality because you fall in love with a couple examples you see of people who are able to navigate their way out of it. The thing about broken clocks is that they write twice a day, right? One of my favorite things. So you're going to be able to point to some specific examples of how the hustle worked. But when you buy into that logic and mentality, you buy into an attempt to disrupt a system that is constantly, as I said, perfecting itself. And that's a reality that we don't necessarily get into. And so this whole idea that then, you know, we start to compare hustles, we start to shit on other people who don't necessarily have a hustle or whose hustle don't look like your hustle, like all of that becomes a really complicated, convoluted way of creating divisions and separations between people who start trying to measure themselves up against each other and against the system that was never designed for them to thrive in, right? So hustle mentality ends up being the death knell for us, because not that it's not possible, not that it's not accessible, or not that it's not attainable to, you know, rise and grind and get yourself out to transform your whole situation. It's just that we don't spend enough time talking about why it should never be this way. And so again, misdirected conversation, misdirected dialogue, and the carrot on the stick that leaves people living toxic lives, being evil and terrible to each other, when, as I started with, you know, the basic fundamental components of humanity are these interconnected natures of us being humans, how we work together, how when you get some, I get some, how we take it and split it up into a bunch of different pieces. That mentality and mindset is gone, because it's all about you getting yours. And it's about, you know, me comparing my sheet to your sheet and making sure, you know, you're not shit in the pursuit to the hustle. And I think that's where it becomes demonizing and toxic for people.
And I feel like that's something that me and you was talking about, Rosebud, during the convention. What are some of the ways that you could encourage audience to get more involved in like labor struggles, labor efforts? You know what I'm
saying? So I wanted to also just add to the hustle piece as well, and then I can touch on your current question. I think I think the language can be misconstrued. I think hustle can be an active thing, and it can be a noun, right? Like a proper thing where somebody has a hustle that might be seen connotatively, you know, negative in a you know, has a negative connotation. But then when we're talking about somebody hustling, I think there is another language that our Caucasian counterparts use, which is grit. And I associate grit to resilience and creativity. And so there is nothing wrong with hustling your way out of poverty if it is an action, if it is a verb, if you are being creative, if you are being resilient, and it's just the way that we've chosen to what to call it. When you talk about getting involved in labor, so right now I'm finishing up a degree in psychology. My associates was in labor policy, or what they call labor studies, HR work. And so it's the study labor studies. When you talk about labor versus workforce, labor studies or labor is essentially the policy, the applying law, policy, economics to industry, right? Being able to engage with unions and or support either side on the table. So there is companies or corporations, and then there's workers, what we used to call craftsmen and distributors, right? And so labor is really that conversation there, and then workforce is all about the training, the preparation to either tool someone or to fill a skill gap within the labor market. So one is really primarily focused on training, like workforce, and preparing people to really take on new careers that might pop up. And then another is really trying to maintain the relationship between what we might see as the stakeholder or the investor or the owner, and then the actual laborer or the craftsman or the person with the specialty, right? The way that people, right now you have, excuse me, I have sorry, felt the sneeze coming on. Right now you have rhetoric out, and it's long standing, right? Like you have at will states, you have right to work states. Those are all policies and state level laws that really serve the employer, and it allows them to disarm you, right? Like a right to work state is telling you, hey, if a union is pressing you to join, you don't have to join. They shouldn't be telling you to join just to work in an industry. You can work without the union. That, and people will go for that because they're thinking like, hey, I have to pay dues to the union for them to represent me, but that's not true either. Like a union works on behalf of the people, and so if you don't join, the union has less representation, yet you still benefit from the successes of that union. So when people are pushing out right to work policies, it's to discourage you from signing up with the union, giving them more representation, giving you stronger representation against the employer. And so, like, I think one way to engage is to really critically evaluate if you're at an organization or you're in a field that typically organizes, like maybe you're an engineer, maybe you're a technologist. You can even organize. I don't think people know that you can even organize as consultants, right? As W-2 workers, that people may not always consider 100% employees. You can organize by the industry. You can organize at the national level. You can organize at the local level by your specialty or by your industry. So if you're in tech, you can organize by that. But if you're a welder, maybe you can also organize by that. You want to be able to, I think, historically, blue collar jobs, people that were actually doing hands-on work were the individuals that sought out organizing the most because they were direct talent being sold. There was no input by the employer. They were being managed by an employer. And so unionizing really helped them bring a voice to the table. But if you're in an industry that doesn't necessarily need to be organized, you have other things that organizing has provided to us, like the EEOC. So certain things, even if you're being bound by certain contracts and at-will states, those things are only legitimate as long as no one has, been predatory. They haven't retaliated against you. They haven't discriminated against any of your rights. Like nobody can hold you to a contract, right? I think, and I'll leave it here. I think there's a dynamic that we're not all aware of. You have when you're working, you're depending on your status with the job. You're either subject to federal and state law, or you're subject to federal and contract law. So if you're not a full-time employee and they're not considering you a full employee, you have contract law that should be observed by the state. So anything that you agree on your contract should protect you. And then you have federal law, which protects you from being discriminated on. So those things mitigate states that have at will kind of policies that really don't allow the state law to protect you. But if you're a full-time employee where you're a W-2 worker, they consider you all the things, then you have all three, right? You have contract, state, and federal protections.
Yeah.
So just being able to know that stuff is a way to like engage.
And Toya, I know right now you at a debate camp, and even though
Mhm.
it's a high school debate camp, I know you thinking about the college topic a little bit. How is what he just said? How would it be contextualized in like a college policy debate? Just to let the audience kind of thinking about those different laws, the uniqueness of those laws, the implications that it has in terms of the right to work, in terms of who you sue when you're getting screwed over and messed over. How would that work? Let the audience know how we use them portable skills.
I mean, realistically, I'm gonna be honest with you, because I've been here learning about the United States federal government's exploration and development of the Arctic. I haven't really had a lot of time to think about the college topic and labor and the intricacies and all of that. I will say there were conversations and what we call planks, right? A whole bunch of different itemized parts of the topic for the season or the resolution that specifically wanted to attend to right to work laws and wanted to attend to some of those particular appendages. And the community decided not to hone in on those specific things. But I think so that there can be broader and more intricate conversations and bigger conversations about a lot of the nuances in between employment law and the way that those things get materialized, the ways we empower labor unions, the ways that entrepreneurs and individuals and are able to be compensated, right? So there are a lot of discussions that are being had now. I'm coming from a critical angle with it.
Yeah,
So what
yeah,
I really want to talk about are conversations about employment amongst the least of them, and how kind of trying to define the parameters of employment are largely meaningless unless you account for example, criminalized populations, right? Prison populations in particular. So when we talk about labor, we got to do some abolition, right? There are some particular vectors of labor that are a part of our economy and a part of our society that contribute very meaningfully to how it is that we cohere ourselves as a country. And until we rectify some of the human rights violations dealing with those folks, then there's not a lot to be said about what it looks like to properly define and more precisely employ and effectuate policy around labor. I think about this when you talk about me being at debate camp, and I stop talking here and I think about labor. I pointed my camera over my shoulder because I'm living in a dorm room, and the first thing I wonder who built this, and that's because a lot of the
we can't even hear. I know she's making a good point right now. We can't even hear you right now.
created and developed by prison labor. You know what I'm saying? So when I get to thinking, I'm usually thinking about people whose lives are being sacrificed for our livelihood, right? For people's personhood to be undermined and to be underappreciated, for dehumanization to be the reason why I'm sitting in this chair, and why students across the country, scholars across the country, and classrooms around the world are able to embolden themselves, empower themselves, and set themselves ahead in labor industries at the expense of people who are literally creating the infrastructure for them to get that education, right? So I'm just connecting dots right now. I'm looking for, like I said, the places, the spaces, the cleavages, the contours of labor that we're not talking about, and the people missing from these conversations when we talk about what it means to earn a dollar, to spend a dollar, who gets those dollars, and the bottom line when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I think that's something that I valued about debate. It forced me to think about like the means of production. It forced me to think about who gets to set the value of production.
Exploitation.
Only exploitation. For me, I always think about this. We always talk about how the minimum wage has not risen. And I remember during the pandemic, we talked about a lot of industries celebrating record high profits. I feel like a lot of people that do labor work, whether they're a Marxist or they do work, like Rosebud, they talked about how those record high profits was actually labor theft. And me just thinking about like, how's the value of everything inflating and going up, but the labor itself that creates the products. So the product value has gone up, but the labor to create the product has not gone up. The services value is going up, but the actual labor in itself, the labor, they value ain't going up.
That's crazy.
So to me, it just comes like, so who gets to dictate the means of production? Who gets to dictate the value of one's labor? Because to me, I thought capitalism was about free market, and I get to dictate the value of that. What we know is that's a myth. You know what I'm saying? It's really the employer, you feel me, or the market itself that's really setting the value for how you're able to exchange your labor for some capital. Rosebud, what's your thoughts on that? Oh, I'm bad. I don't know why you're on mute. Can't unmute because they chose me themselves. Oh yeah, you gotta unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Or I don't know.
Yeah, I can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay. Were you talking to me or were you asking her?
Yeah, just what we're talking about right now. So, yeah, see what you come in with.
Okay. I didn't want to cut her off.
No, you good.
So I was going to talk about labor as really a platform, right?
As a what?
As a platform. I think in so many ways, we've been, people prioritize, or the cost of a product, we say it's the production cost, or combined with the shipping cost, being able to access the product. But I think what we're really valuing is the distributor, and not necessarily the actual production. And so when we don't see a rise in minimum wage, and we don't see an increased respect for primary workers, or what do they call? What is it called? I said primary workers, but they're essential workers, right?
Essential workers.
Essential workers. When their pay is not going up, that is direct evidence that we don't value the actual production of a thing, right? We're valuing a brand and a name and the ability to distribute a thing, which is important. Like distribution, globalization, those things are important in order to spread innovation, in order to increase demand, or spaces that you can supply a thing in. But when we're saying we're truly valuing production, or the people, or the things that produce, I don't think that's really understood. I think even so much so that people are afraid even now of AI, right? They believe that they can be replaced. I think that is further evidence that we know in our heart that the production of a thing, the quality that goes into pushing a thing out, is not what is respected, but the distribution, the infrastructure, the grandioseness of an owner, of an entrepreneur, even sometimes, is what's being sold. And so, labor changes. I think we had the Industrial Revolution, where labor and work and access to product and those types of things changed with the invention of, or the expansion of, the railroad, right? And different modes of transportation. I think now labor is in the hands of other technologies, like AI, like the ability to kind of quickly globalize, and to create popularity for a thing very wide and quick. People have to continuously learn how to reposition themselves and be valuable to a system, right? Because the system will kind of learn our thing and kind of try to create that without us, right?
Yeah.
And
Good
that is the historic labor struggle. When we think about when factories were first made, and we think about HR companies, and we think about, factory floors, foremen, middle management, all of that stuff. When we think about, how they industrialized our work, McDonaldized everything, they took the skills of specialists, of, people that really knew a craft, and broke it down into steps, and then trained individuals on these steps, fired the craftsmen, and paid a number of individuals that could replicate steps cheaper, right? And they industrialized, and they controlled access to that. We see that happening again, where people now, like, I work for Microsoft, managing their federal services, and doing a lot of their HR work. And we saw hella federal layoffs. People, even there, I see that there's a reluctance to pay a couple of good, talented people well, versus hiring various less talented people and paying them all less dollars. Micromanaging and trying to compensate for the quality that could be brought on by a more talented individual that may cost a little more, right? And so there's this whole idea of, how do we take a skill, hire cheaper, push out a product. It's really about the distributor. It's not about the maker anymore. And that is where labor comes in. That is equaling the playing field. Nobody's saying that distribution is not important, but we're also saying that the producers, the creatives, those people have to be respected. They have to also be well compensated, and there's enough to do that.
Yeah.
Can I ask y'all a question? And I'm gonna pose this question, and eventually I'm gonna run them real quick for they close the doors on me. But this is kind of a pivot in the conversation, but I was looking through the comments and somebody had talked about this being, you know, an ample opportunity, especially with the prevalence of AI, especially with the undermining and underappreciation of labor, to really, you know, have a bigger cultural shift toward creativity, right? Toward art, toward the things that can't be done by a machine. You know what I'm saying? So when we think about that, I think about two things. One, the WNBA and the church that, you know, was just walking around there and talking about pay me my money, you know what I'm saying? Make sure we get appropriately compensated. I forget the specific message or slogan, but really talking about getting a splits from an industry in the WNBA that's growing vastly, right? And, you know, a lot of people talking about it's only because of Caitlin Clark. Of course, they don't want to give respect to Angel Reese, but also the legacy of many Black women and women in general who have made that in the institution and made it what it is. And then secondly, thinking about, you know, ticket sales and prices and things like Essence and artistic opportunities and places and spaces where we go to appreciate the culture, to appreciate culture in general, and how the price tag is kind of hitting on those things. People are being like, you know, I appreciate your creativity, I appreciate your art, I appreciate your craft, but I can't afford to come, you know what I'm saying, and participate in those things or see those things. So two different conversations, but both of them kind of connected through talented individuals who have branded themselves and put themselves in a position to be compensated for their particular skill set. It's not a part of an industry per se. It's not a part of, you know, the machine. Well, it is a part of the machine, but it's not like the labor that we're talking about. It's like the creativity, right? It's the poetics through basketball. It's the ability to get on the stage and command an audience. So do y'all feel like the people who kind of occupy those sectors of our society deserve more pay because they are so, you know, organically contributing their labor and themselves? Or do you feel like things like concert ticket prices, like, you know, even the question, because a lot of people like WNBA don't deserve no money because they don't bring in money like the NBA, right? How do we
horrible argument, by the way, too.
Where we're validating people's labor in the ways that they entertain us? How are we feeling about the price tag put on entertainment, I guess is my question.
I feel like it's a double-edged sword. And I feel like it's a double-edged sword because a lot of people that's in poverty don't have the leisure time a lot of times to be able to sit around and put a lot of money on entertainment that way. So I feel like it has to like create entertainment. I'm thinking about like shit, when I was in poverty, how much was I gonna pay for a Beyonce ticket? Nothing. Right. When I was eating sleep for dinner, how much was I gonna pay for an NBA ticket? Nothing. You know what I mean? A lot of the things that I feel like I'm able to access now, you know, in terms of entertainment, I didn't have access to it when I was younger, and I think that that's a part of the conversation. You know what I'm saying? But also on the other side, it's like even when we start thinking about it just in terms of creativity, you know, there's always a way for the Black art to be devalued less than the white art, and for the, you know what I'm saying, the industries that have the women to be paid less than the industries with the men, and for, you know what I'm saying, the gay labor to be experienced less than the straight labor. And to me, it's always these binaries of oppression and power, powerless versus powerful, how it always, to me, is best illustrated when we start thinking about creativity. Thinking about, like, you know, I did a documentary on Black art. Y'all should check it out if you ain't seen it, actually. You know, it's on YouTube, Afrofuturism. But in this documentary, I'm talking to different, you know, art collectors, different artists, different art exhibitionists that are Black, that's getting into the unique ways of how Black ownership, Black value, who gets to dictate the value of that in terms of art, how it all becomes very complex in the whole world of art. You know what I'm saying? So when I say like double-edged sword, it's thinking like,
but I guess my question when you think about this double-edged sword is like, you know, when we talk about art, we have to talk about access, right? The ability to appreciate it. We'd also got to talk about the danger of becoming, you know, the Black elite or the Black bourgeoisie, right? Because it's one thing to be paid and compensated for your skill set. It's one thing to make sure that we are honoring what you do and what you present to us in ways that are meaningful for your life, because you are talented, right? We want to acknowledge that. But when it seems like it's a means to an end, like, not specifically talking about, we got to talk about Beyonce and Jay-Z. We got to talk about Rihanna. We got to talk about Black billionaires.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? We got to talk about
Got to.
You know what I'm saying? The like the railroading of Beyonce, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 loading soon, concerts, and like, you know what I'm saying? Is that a healthy model for us to celebrate the art without falling into the fuzzy lines of paying into the engine of Black elitism, right? That really have allowed these people to elevate themselves to different levels and different dimensions that we'll never see or be able to experience. I guess, like, you know, I don't know. I'm just talking. I'm talking what I'm thinking. And shout out to Matino. I see you in the chat. It's always
shout out to Matino, definitely. Man, Rosebud. Well, yeah, Rosebud. What she said a whole bunch of things. I gotta think about it. I don't know if you was able to catch the question. You know what I'm saying? Or catch what she was saying. I gotta think about this.
You said the question. So you're asking, how do we get around successful Black people turning into the bourgeoisie?
How do we feel about it? Right. On one hand, you got people particular talent, have something who that should be celebrated. It should be monetarily compensated for sharing their gift with the world. At the same time, if we're having a conversation about labor, we can't, you know, go without criticizing Black elitism and the fact that it's a path to nowhere for a lot of people, and that it draws people into this rise and grind mentality. It draws people into shit going bankrupt to keep up with people. Just so I can say, I went to these Beyonce concerts multiple times in multiple cities. That's stuff I've been seeing people do at the expense of, you know, being able to pay for their real life. You also have the question mark next to Black billionaires and whether that's something we should, you know, desire and aspire to, especially in a world where we already know it's questionable ways. To be a millionaire, you got to do some questionable things. You know what I'm saying? I'm a billionaire, rather. To be a millionaire, you could be above board. To be a billionaire, we start to question some of the business practices and the ways that you acquired that money. So I guess my big question is, like, holding those things in tension. How do we go about celebrating, acknowledging, and compensating Black artists for their art, but dealing with the fuzzy, blurry lines of Black elitism and billionaire apprehension and status? Because we know in order to make billions,
shit, somebody got to explain.
Various things have to be happening behind that curtain.
I think partially, you know, when we talk about this kind of, you know, deep state of Black elitism, or this kind of subculture, people kind of turning into bourgeoisie or doing something unsavory to attain their wealth. A lot of that is remnants of what we understand of America generally, you know, just being the kind of the deviant that it is. But I think too, now we can't always assume that people have done something unsavory to get their millions, right, or their billions. There are sustainable ways. There are good things that people could have done. So for one, we have to challenge the idea that now in 2025, every last person that has recently become rich or has done anything positive, that is all a hoax, right? And that at some point they've done something super unsavory, right? So on one end, we give the benefit of the doubt, but then two, we're not naive. Like we do know that, like, power unchecked, if it has gone unchecked, has probably committed a crime, or but then we talk about things like good faith, right? Like I don't think that, you know, there are some things that people could have done unknowingly when it comes to, like, maybe financially managing their wealth. Now, if there's anything ethical, I think yeah, we do have to talk about the people who are rich, who do have influence, who have used their influence and their wealth to do bad things or to support things that ultimately, you know, look like bad decisions, right? Like people that have funded campaigns and political parties that generally have, like, really turned the world upside down, or you know, people that have pushed technologies and information in the wrong direction, or have supported or funded things that just didn't have an intention of any goodwill in it. I think those things do exist. I don't personally believe that everyone has done something bad or that you need to amass wealth. But then when we talk about people that have amassed wealth, it's really about how do we continuously educate and inform people of what the issues are, and call on the best parts of people to really invest and push their influences in the right directions.
Okay.
I don't know if that answers your question, but that's just my take.
I don't know that I had a super solid, tight question. I appreciate you flirting with my little thought experiment. I'm sitting over here kind of rolling through it. think about compensating people for the work that they do, for the labor that they do, for the way that they empower other people to pay, right? We also can't ignore the fact that these people are not individual stores and producing stuff and doing this, that, and the other and maintaining their industries. There are people who are empowering and hiring, and giving access to other people. So I think there is some tension there, right? Some people in the comments are just like, yeah, there's not really an ethical way you can go about making $1 billion. But the other side of it, like, so for example, what we always hear about Tyler Perry is that, if nothing else, we got to respect Tyler because he's going to keep some Black folks employed, right? He's going to bring your favorites back to the big screen and make sure they get a check. They're going to make sure these people are working. He's going to open up studios here, there, wherever else. And so I think it becomes a little complicated because we are taking away, the bootstrap dependency for some people. But at the same time, the more money you get, the more you get to operate behind the curtain. The less questions, inquiring minds get to ask, and the less we get to know about how you bake the cake. We just kind of get to read your, look at your social media and maybe read a book that you'll write down the road to see the ingredients, but we never really know all of the fun stuff that went into making this cake a success you had. And so questions start to formulate. And I think multiple things, as usual, are true at the same time. One, there are some above board, very notable, very respectable, very amazing things that you've done to amass your money and to make sure that wealth is spread around. There's also some particular potential interesting things that if you were really, put in a chair under a hot light, you would have to answer to and kind of justify. And so it depends on how you want to, how you want to dive into that. But it's big love to y'all. It's a blessing to meet you, friend. Lee, it's always a joy to be on here rocking with y'all. I love talking to smart people.
Hey, before you leave though,
of the night.
Hold on before you leave. I got because I think Rosebud said some things. I had to look up Beyonce's net worth, but also look at what she did to get it. And I think it kind of begs the question, because she ain't quite a billionaire. I think, what I'm saying? Like, I could ask the question, like, can you be a working class billionaire? But looking at her shit, is like, she exchanging labor for capital. Most of her like adventures, they don't be successful. Most of her money come from album sales, touring, partnerships. You know what I'm saying? Parker Ivy, whatever, Ivy Park, that shit don't be feeling like that. You feel me? The Beyonce, her drink, disgusting. Didn't like it.
Magic in a bottle. It's fixing hairlines and patches and blinds, bald spots. So apparently, Red is the hottest thing smoking. You feel me? So
yeah. Can you be a? Before we get to the billionaires thinking about it, can you be a millionaire proletariat? I think you can. I think you can. Think about it. To me, think about it like this. From like a professional athlete standpoint, do you consider athletes proletariat or bourgeoisie?
It's a hard line to draw one way or another. I say if I had to look an example of the best version of a proletariat millionaire, it would have to be Shaq. Right. When I think about an athlete who has a legacy history of really taking his means, his funds, and spreading them out amongst people, everything down to Shaq shoes. Y'all remember he dropped Shaq shoes.
Yeah.
I'm not even trying to compete with Michael Jordan. I just want to make sure that kids in neighborhoods like the ones I came from have access. You know what I'm saying? I think from Flint? I think he's from the East Coast, from New Jersey or something like that.
New Jersey and Dallas.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that no mom has to go to the shoe store with their child. You know what I'm saying? And their child feel left out of not having a mega superstar shoes on. Same thing with Stephon Marbury, right? So that is, to me, that is demonstrative. And there's so many other stories, by the way, of Shaq. I read one 2 days ago. On Twitter, I think. Mama called it Twitter. I'm gonna call it Twitter. That was specifically talking about. I know it was a video. Shaq went to a bridal store to go use the bathroom. He went in the bathroom. They let him use it because he's Shaq. Of course, he's gonna come in and use the bathroom or whatever. He comes out of the restroom and tells the attendant, "Come here, let me holler at you real quick." He said, "Everybody in the store, I'm buying everything for everybody. So wedding dresses, bridesmaid dresses." Your mama need her dress for the event, whatever. He bought everything in the store. It's shit like that. Then I'm like, yeah, because your mentality haven't left the trenches. Your pocket has. Your wallet
in the trenches. But I feel like in Shaq example, especially think about like his shoes, you know what I'm saying, owning little Caesars and different shit like that. It's like, all right, I'm sure a little exploitation in your shit. I get it. I'm thinking of like the millionaires that don't necessarily have a bunch of ventures, but the way they got their millions is for a direct exchange of labor for capital. Because in my mind, a proletariat, you know what I'm saying, means that you working class.
Yeah.
And in my mind, that means it's a direct exchange, labor for capital. In my mind, bourgeoisie, that means that you exploiting other folks' labor and they ain't getting much out of their shit. And you know what I'm saying? Unless we saying that millionaires are exploiting the audience. But I don't think that, I feel like it's exchange of entertainment, you know what I'm saying, a viewer. So you feel me? I don't know. I feel like Rosebud sometimes was like typically this used to be clear to the audience. Typically for me, I do think that billionaires they have like to have a surplus of labor requires exploitation. I believe like at the core, surplus of labor was exploitation. Ain't no way around it. But I do think he said some shit that I feel like begs some nuance.
Yeah, I think what you touch on is kind of like the typical or the historical kind of 3-tier system that we know: low class, middle class, upper class. And when you talk about bourgeoisie in that kind of conservative context, then the bourgeoisie were landowners, they were shopkeepers, they were what we now see as middle management. They were 100,000aires. They weren't necessarily millionaires. When we think about what you talk about now in this context, you know, I think what we hear is you gotta have a hustle and you need to make money 7 ways from it. I think that idea of splitting your profession in 7 ways or making money 7 ways really speaks to labor as a platform. So when you talk about like a proletarian would be somebody who successfully has positioned themselves as the center product, and they are in some way splitting themselves through what we, conservatively what we call a integrated funding model, right? So that means that I'm not getting funding from one source. I'm taking my specialty and I'm splitting it up, and I'm getting grants, I'm getting speaking gigs, I'm getting whatever that is, but it's all off the one topic of maybe say education or labor. And so I'm not just somewhere as a labor specialist being someone's economic or economist or somebody's, organizational psych. I'm also doing a number of other things. So like if I amass my wealth through splitting, like censoring myself as the product and splitting that 7 ways down the middle, then yeah, you can consider me a proletarian who has amassed my wealth from that. And that is what I mean by grit and hustle and being able to amass wealth in a more positive way, right? Those things sometimes grow, and then we do things like we have managed services where we're not necessarily there. It's just our face and our name. And then we're somewhere actually pushing out the work ourselves. We're doing the work ourselves. That is true entrepreneurship versus business owner versus people that go get an MBA versus, somebody that is out here solely on their own. They're looking to split them ways themselves in those ways. And I would consider them proletarians. And especially if they've amassed wealth, then they're rich off of being just that, a proletarian.
Hell yeah.
I'm gonna slide out right now. Big love to y'all. I'm gonna be listening into the conversation. Thank y'all for rocking with me this evening. And Lee, thank you for letting me jump on real quick.
Yeah, do me a favor, actually. The chop up, Toya's on the chop up. My brother Damo. I'll be over there, you know what I'm saying, occasionally. You know what I mean? I would definitely, if y'all like anything Toya said, I definitely would encourage y'all to go to the chop up show, subscribe. They go live every week, bi-week.
We on a little summer hiatus because
They'll be back though.
But for the fall, which is in just a couple weeks, believe it or not, technically, especially if you're on an academic schedule, coming back in August, right? Chop Up Show finna go crazy. So make sure y'all follow us on YouTube. We're also about to be over on Substack, going crazy, going live pretty regularly. So if you got a Substack, if you tapped in with that particular platform, make sure y'all get ready to find us over there too, because we're gonna be chatting. And we're part of the Conscious Collective, right? So where you see it consciously, he got a gang of people pushing, you know what I'm saying, supporting, making sure the conversations get magnified, making sure that we are also, connecting some of the dots in some of the same way it's the same ways he does. So if y'all love Lee, come rock with us. We guarantee you won't be disappointed.
Let's go.
All right, ladies.
Y'all
be big love, much. Wyatt, Yusuf, my bad. Big love to you. Big love to everybody in the chat who's been chiming in. It's always a blessing to be on a good platform with smart people. Y'all be easy. I'm out.
Be easy.
Yes.
Conscious. I'm on 1%, big bro. Let me know what you feel.
Man, yeah. I feel like we're gonna have a part 2. Definitely, you know what I'm saying, bring you back for sure. Any things you want to say to the audience before you leave?
No, man, this is a good journey. Like I said, my work exists in the space of issue area advocacy. I've focused on other issue spaces like hunger, education, connection to work and or school. I'm looking to go through graduate school for industrial labor relations, really honing in on things like this, topics about labor, really trying to support individuals that come from spaces like me, making sure that they can attain permanency and access to opportunity. And so, knowing that, hopefully, you know, I can pop back up on this platform or wherever you guys see me. Please say hello. But I go by Rosebud. Please, you know, check me out. Come say hello. Yeah, all platforms is Rosebud. So, yeah,
Rosebud.
Let's
Rosebud.
go.
Rosebud with 2 D's for a double dose of this. I remember I seen it. You seen it before? You seen it
A
before?
pimp named Rosebud, man. Yeah.
Pimp named Rosebud. Yeah, man.
But
You know.
one D. Much love.
Much love, bro. Much love, man. Shout out to YouTube America. Before they got off, this is actually what I was gonna bring up. Is that it's hard to have a conversation about entrepreneurship and about Black people trying to own our labor while also introducing like Marxist type concepts, because I think that it kind of problematizes a lot of the ways we start talking about being able to hustle, and a lot of ways we start talking about being able to own businesses. YouTube Academia says you can't put these historical Marxist tags on modern figures who seem to do well in larger social structures. Marx didn't even forecast Black folks to be worthy of the bourgeoisie class. I think that's the reason why he talked about this concept of a lumpetariat. He understood that the lumpetariat occupied a different position from the proletariat and from the bourgeoisie, because they both couldn't, own a slave. Before those two got on, I was actually about to get into this Afro-pessimist critique of Marxism, because we know that, Marx definitely has much more of a race neutral understanding of labor. And the center of Marx's analysis is being able to split the world between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, though he does account for this unique position of the lumpetariat. However, within Afro-pessimism, they argue that Marxism fails to fully account for the structural antagonism of anti-Blackness. And most Afro-pessimists, I think, would also say that a lot of the struggle in terms of labor is based in what we would call conflicts and not antagonisms. Conflicts can be compromised. Orlando Patterson is somebody that's seen as like one of the fathers of Afro-pessimism. He had this work about social death that talks about how Black people are rendered socially dead, and how, because we're rendered socially dead, a lot of institutions, a lot of vigilantes always see it as being rational to put violence towards our bodies. You know what I'm saying? Orlando Patterson would say, unlike the proletariat whose labor is exploited, but whose humanity is recognized, Black people exist in a state of social death. Our position is not just economic, but it's ontological. And in college, I learned ontology is just a fancy ass word for like being, you know what I'm saying? The study of being. And what a lot of Afro-pessimists argue is that the ontology of the Middle Passage, the ontology of slavery, impacted the way that Black folks was being seen, and how not only were we seen as slaves, so we started being seen as kind of being non-human. A lot of the Marxist theory is very structured and counter around what a lot of philosophers would say is humanism. You know what I'm saying? And talking about how the slave was not only seen as 3/5 of human that came at the end, but how we were seen as capital that could be bought, traded, and sold with literal commodities. So when we start thinking about how Marx understood, you feel me, the lumpetariat, we understand that it's not the same thing when we start talking about how most white leftists start to couch these conversations. You see what I'm saying? And also understanding that when Marx started to talk about like socialism, he borrows a lot from African, from West African society specifically, and how they had these communal practices that he started to couch as being socialist. I think the conversation about labor does require for us to question a lot of the values that capitalism has given us, especially when it comes to the idea like if you don't work, you don't eat, or the idea that, you know what I'm saying, you're only as valuable as what you produce. To me, these are very capitalistic understandings that don't value community, that don't value the way in which us humans can connect on a more human level, even though I got none critiquing humanism and talking about Afro-pessimism, but and you know what I'm saying, talking about like this like plain talk. It's like, hey, how can we connect more on a human level that doesn't require for you to devalue me as a human based off of how I produce or not produce? A lot of times I think about like plantation patriarchy and how, or plantation politics, and how a lot of our ancestors on the plantation was only valued based off of how productive they were in the plantation. I think that though we're not on the plantation, a lot of us are still impacted by viewing each other through the lens of master, i.e., if you can produce good, then you a good nigga, you a good laborer. If you cannot produce good, then you lazy and you ain't a good nigga, you ain't a good laborer. I feel like if we divorce ourselves from this plantation patriarchy or this plantation politics, this very capitalistic idea that we devalue ourselves based off of production, I think that it make it where we start to be, I feel like a lot more empathy, a lot more ethics with each other, a lot more love with each other. Instead, it's all about being a go-getter. It's all about being able to show that we can hustle. You know what I'm saying? A lot of us end up working ourselves into the grave because we want to prove that we are productive and want to prove our worthiness through work, not knowing, not recognizing that it's literally, you know what I'm saying, walking us, ushering us to the grave very easily. When we start thinking about the proletariat, I mean, the bourgeoisie, the ruling class, the bourgeoisie because they're able to extract value from labor to make it where they're always able to take a lot off top and then give the laborer a little bit. The lot off top, a lot of times is justifiably come taken from us. You know what I mean? A lot of industries always underpay black laborers. Black women, black men, black trans men, black trans women, black gender non-conforming people, black intersex, black people. You feel me? Our labor is always seen as being devalued. A lot of us talk about how once we stop working for free, how a lot of our labor started being trivialized. I think that's a fair, you know what I'm saying, assessment. You know, get into these comments. A lot of values get espoused in hip hop. I think, Jackie, being somebody, you know, I got an undergraduate degree in African American studies, and getting into like hip hop pedagogy and the structure of, you know, hip hop industry is something that we had to kind of explore and get into. And I feel like there was a incentive that was given to rap music that encouraged certain type of braggadocious vibes around wearing designer and, you know what I'm saying, having a whole bunch of gold chains. And that's not always what hip hop was, though. You know what I'm saying? It's important to acknowledge that, like, X-Clan, you feel me? De La Soul, you know, a whole bunch of different groups. A whole bunch of hip hop groups when hip hop first came, I don't think that it reflect the capitalistic, you know, values that hip hop espouses now. I think that's important to acknowledge that. You feel me? I think that a lot of this shit be like manufactured invasions. You know what I'm saying? And it's just, we gotta be able to see it for what it is. But now I'm just blabbering and just, you know what I'm saying, ranting. I appreciate y'all for tuning in this Tuesday or this Wednesday for, you know, I'm calling it Keeping It Conscious. Every Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Central. Tonight we started a little late, but listen, man, y'all know I'm on CP time, so give me like a little 20-minute buffer. You know what I'm saying? But I went live though. We went live next week. I'm actually gonna be talking with the I believe she's the CEO or the CFO of Spill. We're gonna be getting into the Spill app. We're gonna be getting into, you know, Black venture capitalists. We're gonna be getting into Black tech and what it means for Black people to own tech. As well as what it means to create a climate that is inclusive and that is safe for Black people to feel like they can express themselves without having individuals facing discrimination, maybe from white folks or people inside the Black community. I think that the conversation I'm having next week about the Spill app also falls very in line. We'll be getting into. Shout out to you, Daniel. I appreciate you, man, for, you know what I'm saying, tuning in, man. Definitely, you know what I'm saying, definitely appreciate you for tuning in. But yeah, though, man, education is elevation. I'm trying to build this muscle, man, and going consistent. That's the for the bottom half of 2025. The word for consciously is consistency. Can I be consistent on YouTube, specifically on YouTube? Can we? Epstein Files. I might randomly go live in between now and this coming Wednesday about the Epstein files. Cause I have a lot of thoughts about it, but I'm still putting them together. You know what I'm saying? Still putting them together.